Hi, this is Dr. Les, and welcome back to another episode of I Bought a Farm. Now what? Today, I'd like to welcome Dr. Jeff Lehmkuhler. Dr. Lehmkuhler is a beef extension specialist at the University of Kentucky, and his specialty is beef cattle nutrition. We're ready to buy heifers. We're ready to start figuring out where we're going to get our heifers from, type, and all that stuff. But before I talk to the buyers, before I talk to the sale barn, before I talk to any of our private treaty opportunities, we got to figure out how many we're going to buy, right? I mean, you got to start there. You know, we're thinking about receiving the cattle maybe toward the end of this week or beginning of next week, and we'll just receive them up in the barn lot and leave them up there for probably a week, just to be honest about it. After that, I assume we're going to turn out on that northern section and let them graze through that, and then rotate them clockwise through, and then come back in about a month and be back on that northern section. Does that sound about right?
That sounds exactly right.
Perfect. How many head do you think the landowner needs to look at purchasing?
Fantastic question. So when we think about that, we're thinking about a carrying capacity, and carrying capacity is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I'm going to pull up the Kentucky Forage Variety Trial webpage. If folks just use their search engine on their favorite internet search, Dr. Google, Firefox, whatever, and type in KY forages, it'll pull it up here, and you can go to the variety trial data. And I'm just going to throw up this report here and scroll down and give us some to look at here. This is up on the northern edge of Lexington, and on the northern edge of Lexington, you got some pretty deep soils that are going to be somewhat very productive, not in line with what we would typically see on this hillside farm, right?
Yeah, not close.
But if you look here and you look at Kentucky 31, Kentucky 31 potentially over the years of 2017, 18, 19 had an average annual yield of just under 11 tons. That's pretty substantial, right?
Yeah.
But we had a really good growing year last year up until kind of late summer. If you look at this just gives you a rough idea of the range in potential that could be there. I think on this ground, Dr. Anderson, we could be in the ballpark of around 8,000 pounds of dry matter to the acre, or 4 tons. I think that's realistic. You said they're going to put some fertility down. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, I forgot to mention that earlier. We advised them to put, based upon the soil sample, they fertilized about 10 days ago and dropped 60 pounds of nitrogen per acre. So, we were looking about 135 to 100, and I think he put on 138 pounds of urea equivalent. He got the P and K in there too, but there were 60 pounds of nitrogen per acre. So we should start seeing a little bit of that flush now.
2017 was a great grass year. 5 to 6 tons on all these different varieties. To move into 2018, when we had that dry spell, the yield was about half in some of these areas, only about 3 ton. And then last year, it got so dry in that late kind of summer that the yield substantially fell off. And so when you think about carrying capacity or number of animals to buy, Dr. Anderson, you're trying to guess what kind of precipitation and year you're going to go into. And I think our general recommendation is don't plan on this year. Don't plan on the 2017 best year ever. Try to plan on an average or a mean in between. And so in this situation, if you thought about it, that 4 ton of dry matter to the acre is probably going to be more realistic of a normal year for this area. And so I think with the nitrogen and the fertility that you put on that farm, if we get decent precipitation, we'll be in that 4,000 pounds to the acre range. If we don't, we might want to step back and say, let's just plan on 6,000 pounds of dry matter or 3 ton of dry matter to the acre and use that as our baseline. So it is majority hillside. Majority of the ground has been somewhat nutrients have been removed, maybe, and not replenished. So we'll hedge on that 6,000 pounds of dry matter to the acre as our base. If we've got more grass, that's okay.
Yeah.
We can think about running those cattle a little bit longer. Dr. Burdine's, discussion about buying them into, we sink all of our money into those cattle the day we buy them, right? $715, $725 the day we buy them. If we have to sell them in 30 days, we haven't had long enough time to put any value back into those cattle. So we're moving here into getting these cattle in late April. May will be a somewhat of a time frame where grass will start going in the reproductive stage. It will shut down development of leaves and being really productive and trying to make that seed. So it won't be as productive on growth till we get that seed head clipped off. And Dr. Burdine mentioned about doing some mowing, and people overlook that. But one of the real advantages to get in there in mid-May to do a mowing of the fields is, one, to get the seed heads clipped off to prevent pink eye or reduce the risk of pink eye. But two, also to remove that seed head and the hormonal control on that plant to allow it to start bringing in new tillers and getting those leaves to grow a little bit more. So if we start with carrying capacity, just some quick math, and we'll see how good you are on the fly. We're going to use 6,000 pounds of dry matter to the acre. And at 6,000 pounds of dry matter to the acre, we're only going to say taking off 50% of that. You got to leave some residual out there for the grass to regrow. They're going to walk some of it down. They're going to urinate and defecate on some of it, and they're not going to use it. So that gives us 3,000 pounds to the acre of grass we expect to go into the cattle. Let's say we buy them in at 500 pounds, take them up till December, and they're going to hit 800 pounds. So the midpoint there is we put on, roughly 250 to 300 pounds. So the midpoint on these cattle is going to be somewhere around 650, ballpark estimate. 700 is going to be on the high side, but let's just say 650 pound heifers. If we assume that these heifers are going to eat about 3% of their body weight a day in dry matter, that's going to put you about 19 to 20 pounds. I'm an easy figuring person, so let's round it up to 20
let's
pounds.
Go to 20. Yeah, exactly.
So we've got all of May, June, July, August, September, October, November. That's 210 days that we're thinking about. And so make the math easy, 200 days, right?
Yeah.
And so we're at 20 pounds of dry matter per day per heifer times 200 days gives us 4,000 pounds that one heifer would need over that grazing period, grazing season.
Yep.
And if we assumed that we had 3,000 available per acre, we need about an acre and a quarter roughly per heifer. That's the quick down and dirty. If the forage is really growing rapidly in the springtime, we could buy in more heifers and then come mid to late June, sell a few of them off when the grass production starts to slow down. We could, if we have excess forage, that's okay. We can take advantage of that in December, January, February. And if the market looks unfavorable for us to market these heifers in November, and we're going to breed them, this stockpile fescue is a fantastic forage to have that time of the year.
Absolutely.
And with the profit margins being a bit tight right now and having some uncertainty, I would rather stock low and have extra grass to carry us to reduce our inputs into the winter. So in a nutshell, we have about 32 acres. I'm going to take 2 acres to 3 acres out for woods and areas, the barns and that are the ponds. Haven't done the math exactly, but let's just assume we've got about 26 to 27 acres, really productive forage on that farm. So, that's about 20 to 25 head tops. I would buy 20 on this piece. You got another piece of ground over there we haven't talked about that we can run another 3 to 5 head on pretty easy on that other piece. So maybe buying in 25 to start with and see where we're at. I think the other thing is what happens, Dr. Anderson, if we get one of those that just is a poor doer or is just too crazy to manage in the system. That's the real world, and buying a few extra and selling them early on is not uncommon.
Yeah. It's, the most I think we were really considering on buying was 30, with the thought that we would cull down pretty quick. Find a, because you're always going to have some dinks. And we don't know how we're going to buy them yet, whether we're going to get them from the stockyards or from an order buyer or private treaty. We know we want weaned heifers. We know we want vaccinated heifers, single owner if possible. But, depending upon the route you go, you don't know how assured you are of that, right?
That's right.
And so, we'll bring the cattle in. Again, we were thinking around 30. Let them in the barn lot there a little bit. Hand feed them, just for that 7 to 10 days to get a good idea, really get a good idea of who the heifers are, what they're capable of, and if there's anything we need to move back, to go back to the sale barn, and then find a really nice uniform set of maybe 25 that we can push through from June on, because in May we're going to have some grass and we're going to be able to utilize. We're going to be, if we have a few more head there, and the uncertainty in the market is the problem, right? Right now we have no idea what this COVID thing is going to continue to do to our markets. We were on the down end of the cattle cycle, so we were expecting much higher prices this spring than what we got. And that could rebound pretty rapidly, right? It could turn, and sometime here, just as soon as some of this stuff clears up, we could have a pretty good market and actually make money on just a little bit on those early ones that we call out. I think that's the plan. At one time we were thinking maybe 40. But man, that's pushing it awful hard. And we're going to lose so much money on our potential for profit on that extra 10 is going to be really minimal. And as a matter of fact, I think we could probably lose money on those if for this year, because our grass base just isn't where it needs to be. And I think for a safe option for us right now is somewhere in that 25 to 30 head, and roll from there. So
I think that's right, and the way I would look at it is the flexibility also is important, because I'd like all those heifers to be purchased on the same day. And if it meant that I bought 22 on that day and I wanted 30, it may not be worth going back the next week and getting the other 8.
No, I want a group of 30, man. I don't want to mix.
Yeah.
If I can, single owner, but that's stuff we're going to talk with Val and Jim about. They're the professional cattle buyers. And I've identified a source where we may be able to get them, because honestly, finding 30 fall-born heifers is not easy, from in a single source here in Kentucky. And so I've identified one place we're probably going to run up and look at, but otherwise, we got a great plan now. We got a great plan. We know what the capacity of our ground it potentially is. And now what we got to do is find the heifers, receive the heifers, set our poly wire up, and watch them suckers grow. Hopefully make our landowners some cash.
Exactly. And the beauty on that is, if you can set this up to be profitable, there's always a little bit more enjoyment in it. But that money then can be reinvested into farm improvements to improve things over time to make the farm more productive.
And that's their goal is, when we talked about this with Adam in one of the earlier episodes. If you buy a property and you don't do anything with it, it just reverts back to its natural state, which is junk. And you know what junk is worth? Junk, right? And someday he may want to sell this property. Someday his kids could inherit it. And, he wants to pass on a valuable, useful piece of property. And that, I think a lot of people have that same goal, or in that same situation where they have property or they inherited property and they want to maintain that either for their kids or to do something for retirement. But if you have good property, you want to maintain it and build it. And if we can get something out of one of these enterprises, that's going to allow this landowner to do something with the property. So, any last comments, Dr. Jeff, before we?
Sure. So I would really encourage folks to go in and visit with their county extension agent, and also with their soil conservation district personnel or NRCS personnel, to look at some of those opportunities to get cost share money for these facilities, temporary fencing, water systems, etc. There's funds out there for that. The other thing that folks don't think about or take advantage of is, even if you don't get cost share money for it, NRCS staff can develop a grazing plan for you. We have some professionals that are technical service providers in the state that they will develop an extensive grazing plan for your farm. And they basically then, having that plan allows you to get access to additional funding. They charge the money, or their expenses are charged to develop the plan, and then NRCS funds pay that. So the farmer has very minimal out-of-pocket expense for that. But the other component of that is, as you move forward with these things, understand that grazing management is as much of an art as it is a science, and the best way to get better at something that's an art is just to practice.
Yeah. I mean, and find your best information sources, which hopefully, we can be included in that. And of course, NRCS and your county agent. We had a whole episode on extension and the importance of extension and utilizing the extension service. But that's kind of the purpose of this video series, is to give people some idea of where to go if they're in this situation, and where they can find good, reliable, unbiased information, and help to move them from point A to point B, because that's always our goal, right?
Exactly.
To help folks go from point A to point B, wherever they start at. If you're starting at ground zero, or if you're a very advanced cattle operation, we want to just make you a little bit better regardless of where you started. Thanks a ton, Jeff, for joining us today and giving us a phenomenal session on forage management. And I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time on I Bought a Farm, Now What?